So, what is your perspective now on the establishment? So, you know, another religious movement also gaining ground in political circles as well. The establishment of the Religious Liberty Commission, where one of ours, Dr. Ben Carson, was positioned there and appointed there as the vice chairman.
Yeah.
I did do a video about that, shared some perspective. I would like to hear from you. Do you see this as a good thing, or is this another one of those church and state
So
coming together kind of thing?
break that down for me a little bit. What exactly? What's the purpose or goal? Because I haven't read too much into it.
I was actually gonna share and read what's the goal.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
you go ahead.
I pulled it up here. It says the U.S. Commission on Religious Liberty is tasked with producing a comprehensive report on the foundations of religious liberty in America, strategies to increase awareness of and celebrate America's peaceful religious pluralism, current threats to religious liberty, and strategies to preserve and enhance protections for future generations. Some of its areas of focus include school choice and conscience protections. That's what I pulled up online. That's like the basic, but
I was going to follow with that and quote Carson. Now, we can't, I think sometimes light and truth is painful when we don't want to see because we don't want to deal with the reality of what's in front of us. I just want to group two things together to show you how fast and rapid that this is developing in relation to the image beast and along with people within our own denomination that have lost sight of the importance of what we have been shown, told, and given by God to keep us from falling into this trap. I'm going to quote Carson. It says, and those people that like to criticize America, criticize people in America and always talking about separation of church and state, which is not in the Constitution. By the way, do they realize that our founding document, the Declaration of Independence, talks about certain unalienable rights given to us by our Creator, aka God? Do they realize that the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag says we are one nation?
But they understand.
In many courtrooms on the wall, it says, in God we trust. Every coin in our pocket, every bill in our wallet says, in God we trust. So if it's in our founding documents, it's in our pledge, it's in our courts, it's in our money, but we are not supposed to talk about it. What in the world is that? In medicine, we call it schizophrenia. Now, I want to say this because I've watched Ben Carson. He does not believe clearly in separation of church and state.
mm-hmm.
And watch this. He's being put in a position now in the White House. Now you have our own man, Diop, who is saying that he does not believe in the third angel's message, which warns us about church and state. He's religious liberty director. You bring these two together with this Christian task force and the Trump administration now that's bringing in Project 2025. You are setting the stage for the full development of the prophecies in Revelations chapter 13 to begin to persecute those like us who have been given the commission to warn people about this system that's coming.
Wow. You know, when you quoted the man's word, it's hard to counter argue what you've said because you quoted his words. And I also want to play another video that pretty much says exactly what you've said. So not anybody says you either saying something that's not true, but listen to the similarity statements here in what he says.
But they understood a concept called the common good. That's language that you see in much of the writings of our founders. The common good, what's good for all of us, not what's good for the Polish section or the German section or the African section, but what's good for everybody.
One of the reasons that people talked about the common good and believed that it was important is because they were Christians, and therefore they believed in the moral equality of mankind because every person's created by God.
You know, the Constitution says nothing about separation of church and state, by the way. That's been distorted tremendously. But I like to ask these people, exactly why don't you want the Ten Commandments to be taught? What is wrong with thou shalt not kill?
As soon as I hear the common good, Justin, there's like
Oh
I
man,
have a
Yeah,
I have a knee jerk reaction to that term.
listen,
You can understand why. But
absolutely. The laws.
Elder Brian Tyler wasn't lying when he quoted what he quoted. These were the words of the man. I don't know. I have a mix. I have a mixed emotion when it comes to Ben Carson. I like him. I like his mannerism and sincerity. But I think sometime too. I don't know if he still believes. Does he still believe in what we believe as a people?
yeah. Because oh, sorry.
Has
Go
he
ahead.
read? I'm sorry. Has he read the Great Controversy? Does he still believe what Ellen White says is true?
Yeah.
I'm just asking that question because if he does, there I will think he will definitely think differently about some of the things that he's promoting here. Maybe I'm totally wrong in misconstruing him. That's why I would love to see if I could sit with him on Advent Media Connect and ask those questions directly to see what he says. But maybe we're totally missing the mark. Maybe he sees something that you and I cannot see. Maybe we are the ones who are biased here and cannot see the light. So I'm willing to admit that if that is the case. So go ahead, Justin.
It's. I'm sorry. It's not making sense. It's not making sense. I got questions. I got
Yeah,
questions
I have questions too.
because
Yeah.
it's okay. Common good. Let's just start there. Common good for everyone. In this world, there's no such thing. Not in this world. I was going to make a comment earlier that when they said they had the anti-Christian bias task force thing, you can't. It's that task force is not even covering all of Christendom because you have the liberal Christians who clearly do not align with conservative Christians. So that would be something that I think sometimes people forget that these are still politicians and their enemy is the opposition, which in this case would be the left. And so whatever they're doing, they're trying to counteract who they view as their enemy, which is the left. So in other words, these are kind of, I don't want to say war tactics, but they're using these laws to deal with their political enemies. And anyone who even appears to align themselves with those enemies or speak against their agenda, immediately they're grouped into that section. Immediately, you're just like, oh, okay, you're a lefty. What? You believe in separation of church and state? Oh, well, you sound like those leftists. So immediately you're grouped into that, and now you're anti-Christians. You see what I'm saying? So that's the mentality of a lot of these very, very conservative, Christians. Now, this whole thing about the common good, again, from what basis? From what you believe is the common good for everyone? And how do you go about convincing all the other groups that this is good for everybody? Are we going to have a dialogue about that? We're going to have a nice conversation and maybe we convince each other, or are you going to try to do that through legislation? And so I have never witnessed not one law, regardless of government throughout history, where it has been able to perfectly satisfy everybody. It doesn't exist. And the fact that we're trying to do that again is a bit insanity. It's like as though history is not there plain as day teaching us this doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Sorry if I'm ranting, but I'm not these men, I don't know them personally, but I know they're intelligent. They're very, very intelligent, probably more intelligent than I am. I'm struggling as to why we cannot see that this type of ideology fails. It fails miserably and disaster follows after.
Yeah, I only have one pushback against what you said, Justin. You're not renting. I think you're prophesying, because there is there is there is this quotation. I've shared it before. Let me see if I can pull it up quickly. The issue we are now having, as those of us who study history, and it's been said that the only thing we ever learn from history is that we never learn from it.
Yeah.
But the difficult task for you and I is when we sit there, we watching men doing things that will repeat, not only repeat, but rhymes with historical
Yes.
accounts.
Yes.
And the difficult thing for us is there's nothing you can do about it. Or we can simply say, guys, we've been there before. We tried this before.
Yes.
It's not a new thing trying to moralize humanity without God's
Right.
grace or a converted heart. You're going to have tyrants. You're going to have a French Revolution pushback. But the sad reality is it seems that's exactly what's happening. Yeah, that's where we are. Anyway, I don't have any other thoughts. Anybody else?
Yes. So this is what often is individuals tend to do. Like they say, "Oh well, thou shalt not smoke" is not in the Bible. We have to see it word for word, right? Some people use that argument, but the principle is there in First Corinthians chapter 10:31, right? But here Ben says that in the amendment, in the Constitution rather, which is in the First Amendment, it talks about. I'll just read it quickly. It says, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people, peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." So he says that the Constitution does not say separation of church and state. That's what he's saying. The principle of free speech, right? It says Congress shall make no law respecting no law.
Mhm.
Just the fact of making law something is contradicting to what he was saying. That makes sense. Because it doesn't say black on white, but we see here it's
Principle.
not a bridging of church and state. It says clearly the Congress shall make no law respect. That's the First Amendment of the Constitution.
Yeah.
That's interesting because historically, the catechism has always been antagonistic to the U.S. Constitution.
Yes.
So to see the jokes made by Trump with the image, and then you see Project 2025 and the agenda outlined on there being implemented, then we're told in the spirit of prophecy and great controversy, when our nation shall reach his hand across the gulf to grasp hands with the Roman element, then she will fully disconnect herself from God. And when that occurs, it's going to be the very thing that they've done that they now are going to attribute to us for not going along with the agenda, that we're the ones causing the problem and destruction that's coming upon the nation as a result of not going along with church and state and Sunday legislation. So it's all, it's perfectly planned out. But the more people we warn and educate as we're doing like we are now on this platform, the more the sincere seeker will be aware when they see it materializing, and they'll be at least educated enough to make a decision for or against this new system that's being put in place.
The common good, I think, is a dog whistle, and it's a dog whistle to when you initially played that soundbite, James. I thought that there was a time in the United States where Sunday blue laws was conceived because it was for the common good. So when you think about Project 2025, as brother Ty mentioned, you think about the common good with regard to, let's say, religion, or the family, or education, or media, or arts, or entertainment, or business. So what that entails is the common good, but there's a certain ideological superimposition over all of those areas of society. And that is driven, I think, by in large part by those who are the architects of Project 2025. So really pushing the nation back to the time where it was very much intolerant to and really, I think, really even punitive and violent towards those who held views other than where you had really the church and state as a unit. So when we look at you pulled up Daniel and I think it was it
Six.
Daniel 6 and then 26, And so you see Nebuchadnezzar saying, okay, I'm going to make a decree that to worship the God of Daniel.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why Babylon has fallen is because when you unite church and state, then that ultimately leads to persecution, which is why we see the furnaces kindle 7 times hotter. So I think that all of this, the common good, ultimately will not result in the common good for the nation, because it'll ultimately result in persecution for a small minority. There seems to be this notion as well that, that there's this constitutional originalism. So it's you could say that it borders on popery, right? So you have the church fathers within let's say Catholicism, but then you have the church, the fathers within the republic, right? The Republican church fathers. By Republican, I mean the philosophy, not the party. So then we're saying, hey, well, we'll quote the church, the founding fathers, but the founding fathers, if you're going to quote them on the things that you assume that these are goods, right? But then what you do is the things that are less than stellar with regard to things like slavery, right? The founding fathers were the ones who enshrined in the Constitution that enslaved Africans were 3/5 human. So that we sweep under the rug, because that's not the history that we want. We only want to. So there is in terms of a constitutional originalism, you recognize that there's an intellectual dishonesty here, because fundamentally the founding fathers recognized that they were flawed and that they left the door open for a progressive move away from so that the Constitution could be amended from some of the errors that they had actually made, right? It's one of the things, for instance, slavery was, they kicked the can down the road, right? Generations, they'll correct that down the road. So this idea of an ideological originalism is consistent with such tenets like, let's take our country back, right? Make America great again, right? But it is flawed, because it's a flawed ideology, because what we know about human governments is that they are fundamentally imperfect. And what this will do is actually return us to an intolerant, hostile, violent past.
Spot on.